The dark whispers in Greenbrier. The wind swept through the hills of Greenbrier County like a restless spirit, rattling the shutters and carrying with it a chill that seeped into the bones of anyone who dared to stay outside after dusk. In a small house on a quiet lane, Zona Heaster Shue lay awake, staring at the ceiling as shadows flickered across the room, cast by the dim candle on her nightstand. The house, old and creaking with age, seemed alive with whispers and muted groans. Zona could feel a tension in the air that was almost tangible, a pressure pressing on her chest that made every breath feel shallow. She had learned to live with unease since marrying Edward Shue, a man whose charm hid a darkness she could never quite name. But tonight, the unease was heavier, darker, more foreboding than ever before. Zona's life with Edward had begun with hope, filled with laughter and shared dreams, but that light had slowly dimmed. Small arguments had grown into silences filled with icy resentment. The once gentle hands that held her now tightened with anger at the smallest provocation. Edward had always had a temper, but it had escalated in ways that left Zona fearful in quiet moments. She had confided her fears to her mother, Jane Heaster, on more than one occasion, speaking in hushed tones about moments when Edward's eyes darkened, when a casual comment seemed to ignite a spark of rage. Mary Jane had tried to comfort her, attributing her fears to fatigue or imagination, but Zona's intuition never lied. She felt that something terrible lurked just beneath the surface of their domestic life. As the night stretched on, the house seemed to hold its breath. Every floorboard creak, every rustle of the curtains felt amplified. Zona lay stiffly under her quilt, feeling an almost imperceptible vibration in the walls. The faint whisper of wind outside sounded like voices speaking in a language just beyond comprehension. She shivered despite the warmth of the room, pulling the covers tighter around her. Her mind wandered to the day's events, minor quarrels, casual dismissals, but they now seemed to carry a sinister undertone. Something was coming, something she could not escape, no matter how quietly she lay in bed. Downstairs, Edward moved silently through the kitchen. His face was calm, almost serene, belying the storm of emotion that churned beneath. No one in the town would have suspected him. His reputation as a skilled blacksmith and polite citizen masked the violent impulses that he now barely restrained. Tonight his eyes were fixed, determined. Zona had challenged him in small, defiant ways, and tonight his patience had reached its limit. He did not speak. He did not need to. Actions would suffice. The house held its silence, but it trembled with anticipation, as though the walls themselves knew what was about to unfold. The moment arrived with terrifying swiftness. Zona felt herself lifted from the bed as if some invisible hand had gripped her, and a violent force threw her against the wall. Pain exploded through her neck and chest, radiating in hot, stinging waves. Her vision blurred and the world seemed to tilt violently. In those last fleeting moments, consciousness slipping like sand through fingers, Zona understood the cruel truth. The danger she had feared all along was real. It had never been shadows or restless spirits, it was the man she had married. Yet amid the chaos, a final thought crystallized, burning brighter than fear. Someone had to know the truth. Someone had to hear her story. Her life was ending, but justice somehow must follow. A mother's vigil. The next morning, Jane Heaster's heart sank when she noticed her daughter's bed empty of life. Panic surged immediately, but she initially clung to hope. Perhaps Zona had slept in late or wandered outdoors, distracted by the morning light. But the stillness of the house, the chill that seemed out of place, and the subtle disorder in Zona's bedroom told a different story. Mary Jane approached cautiously, dread knotting her stomach. The room was cold, unnervingly so, and the candlelight flickered weakly across the walls. Zona lay there, pale, motionless, and unmistakably gone. Mary Jane's maternal instinct screamed. Something was horribly wrong. Neighbors were summoned and the coroner, Dr. Knapp, was called to examine Zona's body. His verdict was swift: natural causes. Mary Jane could not accept it. Every instinct, every shred of knowledge of her daughter's life screamed that this was impossible. She had watched Edward's temper, heard the whispered arguments, felt Zona's fear in private confessions. No, her daughter had not simply fallen ill. She had been silenced by someone close, someone who should have loved her. That realization ignited in Mary Jane a determination she had never known, a burning need to uncover the truth that would not be extinguished, not by logic, not by doubt, not by the disbelief of neighbors. That night grief transformed into something otherworldly. Mary Jane awoke to faint sounds, soft as whispers but distinct enough to make her pulse quicken. A shadow moved in the room, and in the dim candlelight she saw her daughter's face, pale yet unmistakably alive. Zona's spirit spoke, not with the hollow echo of imagination, but in clear, urgent words. She recounted the manner of her death, describing the violent attack that had ended her life, the breaking of her neck, the cruel force that had left her gasping for air. Edward's name came with chilling clarity. He had done this, and Mary Jane had to act. Fear warred with grief, yet the mother's resolve strengthened. She could not ignore this visitation, this plea from beyond the grave. The first steps toward justice. Mary Jane confided in friends, but their faces reflected doubt, pity, or outright disbelief. How could anyone comprehend that the dead had spoken, that a spirit could recount events with such precision, demanding justice? Yet Mary Jane did not falter. She approached John Alfred Preston, the local prosecutor, recounting every detail exactly as Zona's spirit had told her. Preston, a man guided by law yet not entirely blind to human emotion, agreed to investigate further. The extraordinary nature of her testimony did not dissuade him from seeking the truth. A decision was made that would shock the town. Zona's body would be exhumed, a bold move to verify the ghostly account. The community buzzed with whispers as the grave was opened. Curious onlookers gathered at a cautious distance. When the coffin lid was removed, the findings were horrifying yet precise. Zona's neck had been broken, her windpipe crushed, clear signs of strangulation evident to all. The spectral account and the physical evidence were in perfect alignment, validating Mary Jane's insistence. This moment marked the first crack in Edward Shue's facade of respectability, and introduced an element of the supernatural into the cold logic of law. Preparations for Edward's arrest and trial commenced, fueled by Mary Jane's testimony and the undeniable findings of the exhumation. The townspeople, once skeptical, began to murmur in shock and awe, witnessing a mother's grief transform into a conduit for justice. It was a case that defied logic and would forever alter the community's perception of life, death, and the unseen forces that might intervene when the living fail to act. The arrest and the whispers of the town. Edward Shue was taken into custody quietly, his hands bound and his face a mask of calm that did not reach his eyes. The news spread through Greenbrier County like wildfire. The townsfolk whispered in alleyways, at the market, and along the creaking lanes. The blacksmith, the respected neighbor, the husband of Zona Heaster Shue, had been accused of murder. The allegations were extraordinary, almost unbelievable. A mother's claim that her deceased daughter had appeared to her, detailing the very manner of her death, had set the legal wheels in motion. It was the talk of every home, and yet beneath the murmurs, a tension gripped the community. Curiosity mingled with fear. People wanted to know the truth, but they also feared the implications. If a ghost could testify, what else might lurk unseen, influencing the lives of the living? Edward, meanwhile, maintained a veneer of composure. His blacksmith's hands, rough and scarred from years of labor, trembled only slightly. Those who observed him noted a tension in his jaw, a flicker in his gaze that suggested awareness of the gravity of the situation. He had thought he could contain his temper, that his crimes, or at least his secrets, would remain hidden behind his reputation. Yet here he was under scrutiny, subject to an accusation that was both unimaginable and undeniable. As the sheriff led him through the streets, the townsfolk gave way, staring but saying nothing. Some were sympathetic, others hostile, and many simply feared the unfolding drama. There was no denying it. The story had become legend even before it had concluded. Preparations for the trial. The trial was scheduled in the summer of 1897. In the weeks leading up, the courthouse buzzed with anticipation. Mary Jane Heaster's persistence had forced the legal system to confront a case unlike any in its history. Prosecutor John Alfred Preston meticulously reviewed every detail, correlating the mother's account with the physical evidence discovered during Zona's exhumation. He understood that convincing a jury would require careful handling. The supernatural aspect could provoke ridicule or disbelief. Yet the physical evidence alone, the broken neck, the crushed windpipe, signs of strangulation, was compelling. The spectral testimony was a supplement, a guiding narrative that clarified what the cold evidence could not fully explain. Defense attorneys, sensing an opportunity, planned to attack Mary Jane's credibility. They described her visions as the product of grief, a mother's mind attempting to rationalize tragedy. Some whispered of hysteria, others of superstition, and they attempted to frame her claims as absurd and unreliable. Yet Mary Jane was unwavering. She recounted every detail with precision. The exact manner in which Edward had struck Zona, the sequence of events leading to her death, even the subtle ways in which the attack had unfolded. Her calm, detailed testimony made it difficult to dismiss her outright. She was not a frantic, hysterical mother, but a composed witness who had been entrusted with her daughter's final words. The courtroom tension. When the trial commenced, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Locals, curious journalists, and even outsiders from neighboring counties crowded in, eager to witness an event that had already taken on mythic proportions. Edward Shue entered with the poise of a man accustomed to respect, yet tension underlaid every measured step. Prosecutor Preston presented the exhumation findings first, laying out the evidence with clinical precision: the fractures in the neck, the damaged windpipe, and the unmistakable signs of manual strangulation. The jury listened intently, some visibly shocked, others quietly whispering among themselves. Then came Mary Jane's testimony. She described the visits from her daughter's spirit, recounting the vivid details of Zona's final moments. Her voice was steady, yet carried the weight of grief and conviction. The courtroom fell into a tense hush. Some gasped, others leaned forward in disbelief. Could a jury truly consider a ghost's words as credible evidence? The defense objected repeatedly, claiming the testimony was inadmissible, but the presiding judge allowed Mary Jane to continue, reasoning that her account could serve as a supplementary narrative to explain the evidence already presented. The strange combination of physical proof and spiritual testimony created a tension in the room that was almost unbearable. Edward's defense attempted to discredit him by emphasizing his reputation, claiming that accusations arose from neighborhood gossip and grief-driven hysteria. They painted him as a loving husband caught in the crossfire of a grieving mother's imagination. Yet every detail Mary Jane provided, every piece of evidence uncovered during the exhumation, was consistent. The defense's narrative began to crumble, and whispers in the gallery grew louder. The supernatural claims did not contradict reality, they guided the understanding of it. The ghost's testimony in detail. Mary Jane recounted, with chilling clarity, the moments leading to her daughter's death. She described Edward's sudden rage, the way he struck Zona with such force that her neck snapped, and the final moments when she struggled for breath, her eyes wide with fear. The ghostly visitations had revealed not only the act itself but subtle details. The timing, the sequence of events, the silent movements that Edward had assumed no one would notice. This testimony, unusual and extraordinary, was supplemented by corroborating evidence discovered during the exhumation. Every detail aligned perfectly, leaving little room for doubt. Witnesses who had known the family added context, describing Edward's temper, his previous marriages, and the unexplained death of a former spouse. Though the case relied on both tangible evidence and the mother's unusual account, the combined weight of these factors painted a compelling picture for the jury. The courtroom atmosphere was electric with tension. Observers were captivated, horrified, and deeply unsettled. A murder conviction had never hinged on a mother's account of a ghost, yet here it was, unfolding before their very eyes. Community reactions and rumors. Outside the courthouse, the town was alive with speculation. Every resident had an opinion, and stories multiplied with each telling. Some dismissed Mary Jane's claims as superstition, others whispered about the power of the spirit world, while a few believed that justice had indeed been guided by forces beyond human understanding. The newspapers covered the trial extensively, and the case gained national attention. People were fascinated by the combination of human cruelty, maternal devotion, and supernatural elements. The Greenbrier Ghost story was not just a local scandal. It was a narrative that challenged conventional understanding of life, death, and justice. The trial dragged on for weeks, each day bringing new testimonies, new revelations, and new suspense. Edward remained composed outwardly, but reports from guards and witnesses indicated that he was increasingly anxious. He understood that the physical evidence was damning, but the added weight of Mary Jane's unwavering testimony, the precise, detailed recounting of his crime by the victim herself, even from beyond the grave, was something he could neither predict nor defend against convincingly. The verdict approaches. As the trial neared its conclusion, tension in the courtroom reached a peak. Jurors, previously skeptical of the ghostly testimony, were now visibly affected by the consistency between Mary Jane's account and the evidence. The prosecution summarized the case meticulously. Edward's temper, his previous suspicious marriages, the autopsy results, and the mother's extraordinary testimony. The defense attempted one final appeal to logic and reason, arguing that grief had clouded perception, and that the supernatural elements should carry no weight. Yet even the most rational observers could not ignore the alignment of facts and testimony. When the jury retired to deliberate, the air outside the courthouse was thick with anticipation. Townspeople gathered in small groups, speculating about the outcome. Would a man known and respected in the community be convicted based largely on testimony that included a ghostly account? The questions lingered in the air, unanswered, as the jury took hours to weigh the evidence, the testimonies, and the unprecedented nature of the case. The historic verdict. Finally, after long hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. Edward Stribling Trout Shue had been convicted of murder, and a life sentence was imposed. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, relief, and disbelief. A mother's grief had achieved what logic alone could not: justice for her daughter. The supernatural element, once dismissed as fanciful, had played a pivotal role in guiding attention to undeniable physical evidence. Edward was taken away to begin his sentence, the life he had carefully constructed unraveling completely. The town of Greenbrier County would never forget the trial, nor the mother who had refused to let her daughter's voice be silenced, even from beyond the grave. Stories of the ghostly visitation spread, adding layers of intrigue, fear, and fascination to an already sensational case. Newspapers recounted the events, the tale crossing state lines, capturing imaginations, and challenging the boundaries between life, death, and the pursuit of justice. The shadow of conviction. Edward Stribling Trout Shue was escorted to the West Virginia State Penitentiary, the heavy iron doors clanging shut behind him, sealing away both the man and the secrets he carried. His life, once governed by the rigid routines of a blacksmith and husband, had been reduced to the cold monotony of a prison cell. Each day, he faced the unrelenting reality of his guilt and the judgment of the world outside. Guards reported that he often sat in silence, staring at the gray walls, his hands clasped tightly as though restraining more than just himself. Occasionally, he would mutter to no one in particular, a half-whispered confession, a curse, or perhaps an attempt to summon the courage to deny his deeds. Yet nothing altered the verdict, and nothing could erase the conviction that had been etched into the history of Greenbrier County. Outside the prison, life in the town settled into a tense normalcy. The trial had concluded, yet the shadow of Zona Heaster Shue lingered everywhere. In the gossip of market stalls, in the wary glances exchanged at church gatherings, in the way children hesitated to run through the woods near her former home. Mary Jane Heaster, though exhausted by the ordeal, did not retreat from the world. Her vigilance had not diminished. She continued to recount her daughter's experiences, both for the record and for herself, perhaps to keep the memory alive, perhaps to maintain the connection that had brought justice. The apparition of Zona continued to visit, though now the visits were less frantic, more solemn. She would appear in fleeting moments, reminding her mother that justice had been served, but also that the story of her death, and the lesson it imparted, must endure. The ghost's lingering presence. Neighbors began to whisper again about the strange occurrences that had plagued the Heaster home. Footsteps in empty rooms, faint cries at odd hours, and fleeting glimpses of a pale figure moving silently through the halls, all attributed to Zona's restless spirit. Some dismissed these reports as imagination fueled by grief and rumor, while others were convinced of the supernatural truth. Mary Jane herself recounted moments of reassurance and warnings from her daughter's spirit, the ghost acting as a vigilant guardian even after Edward's conviction. She claimed that Zona's presence served as both comfort and reminder, that even in death, the human spirit could exert influence over the living, guiding them toward truth and justice. The local press picked up on these reports, embellishing the story with each retelling. Articles described the Heaster home as haunted, and accounts of spectral visitations became more vivid, capturing the fascination of readers far beyond Greenbrier County. In some retellings, Zona was portrayed as a gentle, guiding spirit. In others, she was a spectral avenger, a warning to those who might commit crimes in secret. Mary Jane, however, remained grounded in reality, insisting that her daughter's appearances were never intended to terrify, but to reveal the truth. Her testimony had been precise and factual. The supernatural element merely brought attention to facts that otherwise might have gone unnoticed. Edward in prison. Prison life was harsh, but Edward's days were haunted not by the bars that confined him, but by the memory of Zona's face, the knowledge that the mother who had fought so tirelessly for her daughter had seen the truth and acted upon it. Fellow inmates reported that he would often stare into the corners of his cell, as though expecting to see her ghost. Sometimes he would pace, muttering about injustice, about misunderstanding, about the chain of events that had brought him to this fate. The irony of a convicted murderer haunted by the spirit of his victim was not lost on the guards, who shared whispered stories of Edward's increasing unease. Mary Jane, meanwhile, continued her life with a measured resilience. She visited the cemetery often, tending to Zona's grave, talking to her daughter as though she were alive. Each visit was a blend of sorrow, relief, and continued vigilance. Mary Jane's actions were a testament to her belief that a mother's love does not end with death, and that truth and justice require relentless pursuit. The community's continued fascination. Even years after the trial, Greenbrier County residents spoke of the Heaster case with awe. Families shared the story with their children as both cautionary tale and moral lesson. Evil may hide behind respectability, but truth has a way of revealing itself. Visitors to the town would sometimes stop at the Heaster house, hoping for a glimpse of the supernatural or at least a tangible sense of the mystery that had gripped the community decades prior. The story spread beyond the county and state lines, drawing attention from scholars, folklorists, and legal historians. Many were intrigued by the unique nature of the case, the fact that a spectral visitation could be central to a criminal conviction. Legal professionals debated the implications, questioning whether the supernatural should ever be considered in evidence, while folklore enthusiasts celebrated it as one of the most remarkable true ghost stories in American history. Mary Jane's resolve. Despite the public fascination, Mary Jane remained focused on her daughter's memory rather than the notoriety of the case. She continued to advocate for truth, often speaking at gatherings, sharing her experiences with those willing to listen. Her unwavering devotion became a hallmark of her life. People admired her courage, and in some ways feared it. The image of a grieving mother confronting both mortal and spectral forces had a gravity that left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of the county. Mary Jane's account emphasized that Zona's spirit was not malevolent. The visits were precise, deliberate, and instructional. Zona's ghost had pointed to the facts, described her assailant, and guided her mother to seek justice. The supernatural element was never about fear. It was about revelation, about ensuring that a crime hidden from mortal eyes was brought into the light. The haunting lessons. The Greenbrier Ghost case also served as a reflection of the social dynamics of the time. The community had been quick to accept explanations that seemed convenient, to dismiss a mother's intuition, to assume natural causes for what was, in truth, murder. The extraordinary circumstances forced a reconsideration of what constituted evidence, of how grief, intuition, and even belief in the unseen could influence human understanding. The story challenged conventional wisdom, illustrating that the line between the natural and the supernatural, between skepticism and belief, could be both delicate and consequential. Folklore and legal history intertwined uniquely in Greenbrier County. Scholars later analyzed the case, noting its singular nature, the only known instance in United States history where a ghost's testimony, albeit filtered through a living person, played a role in securing a conviction. Mary Jane's unwavering pursuit of truth elevated the story beyond mere sensationalism, transforming it into a testament to the enduring power of maternal love, moral courage, and faith in justice. Edward's final years. Edward's final years in prison were marked by increasing isolation. Though surrounded by other inmates and under constant surveillance, he was plagued by the certainty of his guilt, the memory of Mary Jane's resolute face, and the knowledge that the supernatural had played a role in his downfall. Reports from guards indicate that he sometimes refused meals, sat silently for hours, or murmured to the shadows in his cell. Some interpreted this as remorse, others as fear of a spectral presence. Regardless, his decline was slow but steady, culminating in his death in 1900. The mysterious circumstances of his final days only added to the eerie legacy of the case, leaving lingering questions in the minds of those who had witnessed the trial and its aftermath. The echoes of Zona's voice. Even after Edward Stribling Trout Shue's death in 1900, the story of Zona Heaster Shue continued to reverberate through Greenbrier County. The town had not forgotten the unusual trial, the mother who refused to accept a natural cause of death, and the spectral witness who had guided justice from beyond the grave. People still spoke in hushed tones about the shadowy figure glimpsed near the Heaster home, about footsteps echoing in empty rooms, and about the sensation of a presence that seemed protective rather than threatening. Zona's story had become more than a tale of murder. It had become a legend, a symbol of the power of truth, love, and the unseen forces that might intervene when human justice falters. Mary Jane Heaster, though aged and weathered by grief, remained devoted to her daughter's memory. She tended the grave with meticulous care, placing flowers and speaking to Zona as though she were present in the world of the living. Her faith in her daughter's spirit never wavered. To Mary Jane, Zona had been both victim and guide, a force that compelled her to act, to demand accountability, and to confront evil directly. This bond, forged in tragedy and sustained by supernatural intervention, had left an indelible mark on the mother's life, giving her a purpose that transcended sorrow. The town remembers. Greenbrier County embraced the story as part of its collective history. Residents told it to their children, and visitors came seeking to experience the haunting for themselves. The Heaster home, though ordinary in appearance, carried the weight of legend. Local historians preserved the accounts of the trial, the exhumation, and Mary Jane's testimony. Newspapers from across the state recounted the tale in both factual and embellished terms, and over the decades, Zona's ghost became a fixture of American folklore. The Greenbrier Ghost was celebrated not only as a story of murder and justice, but also as a cautionary tale. Evil may hide behind respectability, but truth has a way of revealing itself, sometimes in the most extraordinary forms. Scholars later reflected on the case as a unique intersection of law and folklore. It posed difficult questions about evidence, belief, and the power of maternal instinct. The trial demonstrated that justice can sometimes emerge through unconventional channels, guided not only by human perception, but by intuition, perseverance, and even the inexplicable. Zona's story challenged the limits of conventional reasoning and left a permanent imprint on the legal and cultural landscape of West Virginia and beyond. The enduring mystery. Despite the historical records, questions lingered. Was the ghost truly the instrument of justice? Or had Mary Jane's intimate knowledge of her daughter's life and Edward's temperament been sufficient to guide the investigation? Could grief alone have created the spectral apparitions, or was there something genuinely supernatural at work? These questions were debated endlessly, drawing interest from paranormal enthusiasts, legal scholars, and storytellers alike. Some viewed it as proof that the dead can intervene in the affairs of the living, while others considered it a remarkable coincidence, a mother's love and intuition interpreted through legend. Whatever the explanation, the mystery of the Greenbrier Ghost continued to captivate imaginations, ensuring that Zona's story would never be forgotten. Even today, visitors to Greenbrier County recount the tale, passing along the legend of a young woman whose voice from beyond the grave revealed the truth. The markers near Zona's grave and the Heaster home serve as reminders of the case, immortalizing the extraordinary events that unfolded in 1897. Tour guides and historians emphasize both the tragic and the miraculous, portraying the story as a testament to the power of conviction, the bond between mother and daughter, and the strange ways in which justice can manifest. A mother's triumph. In the end, Mary Jane Heaster's unwavering resolve ensured that Zona Heaster Shue would not be forgotten. Through grief, determination, and a connection that transcended the boundaries of life and death, she brought a murderer to justice. Edward Shue's life, once filled with deception and cruelty, was brought to an irrevocable conclusion, and the truth of Zona's final moments became a permanent part of the historical record. Mary Jane's courage became a beacon, illustrating the lengths to which a mother will go to protect her child, even after death.